On the morning of November 29th, the port of Novorossiysk, the beating heart of Russia's energy exports in the Black Sea, and the loading points of the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, CPC, right next to it, came to a halt. This was not merely the suspension of port operations, it was the severing of the aorta of a vast empire. That morning, when the echoes of explosions in the icy waters of the Black Sea died down, what remained was something far more terrifying than smoke or debris. Silence. I want you to think about this for a moment. Picture that moment, that silence in your mind. The massive pumps that had been working non-stop for years, pumping billions of dollars worth of black gold into the world's arteries, fell silent. Novorossiysk, Moscow's largest gateway to the world, the lungs of its energy exports. But that morning, that gateway slammed shut in their faces. The crisis wasn't limited to the port. Zoom out a bit in your mind. Look at the open waters of the Black Sea. There, you will see how Ukraine's naval drones turned Russia's famous ghost-like shadow fleet into piles of scrap metal, the Syros and Virat tankers. Once symbols of Russia's power to circumvent sanctions, now just metal piles sinking to the bottom of the sea. And when Vladimir Putin woke up that morning, he had to face one simple truth. The Black Sea is no longer Russia's safe lake. The Black Sea is now Russia's logistical helplessness. But that's not the story I really want to tell. Because even though the shockwave of this explosion was felt in Moscow, the real earthquake didn't happen in Moscow. The real devastation occurred 2,000 kilometers east of the explosion site, in the middle of the boundless steppes, in Astana, the capital of Kazakhstan. This may seem strange at first glance. Why would the bombing of a Russian port have an earthquake effect in Kazakhstan? This is where the part of the story that astonished me the most and made me think long and hard begins. Because 80% of the oil flowing through that terminal and those pipelines does not belong to Russia. That oil is Kazakhstan's national treasure. Can you imagine? That pipeline, which carries oil from Kazakhstan's largest oil field, Tengiz, winding its way through Russian territory for 1,511 kilometers to reach the Black Sea, is the lifeblood of the Kazakh economy. And 4 years ago, when Kazakhstan had options, they chose the easy way out. They chose to conduct their trade through Russia, entrusting their national income to Vladimir Putin's security umbrella. And now karma is exacting the heaviest price for that choice. Consider this irony. Putin mocked Germany in interviews with Western media, saying they had entered a recession because they abandoned Russian gas. But the same Putin cut off the economic lifeline of his closest ally, Kazakhstan, because of a port his own army couldn't protect. When I read the statement from the Kazakh Energy Ministry immediately after the incident, I couldn't believe my eyes. Such government statements are usually boring, gray, and avoid controversy. But this was different. This statement was a text that pushed the boundaries of diplomatic courtesy, filled with anger between the lines. While condemning the attack, Kazakh officials emphasized, this is an entirely civilian international energy project. The consortium includes Western companies such as Chevron and Exxon. You don't need to be a diplomat to read between the lines of these sentences. Kazakhstan is clearly shouting at Putin, your war is hitting my economy. Your war is hitting my Western partners' investments. If you can't even protect your own port, why should I entrust my national wealth to you? This is not an ally's grumbling. This is the sound of a breakup. And let's be honest, this event is not only a disaster for Kazakhstan, but also a golden opportunity against Putin. The ministry's immediate announcement of emergency alternative routes shows that the cards on the table have been completely reshuffled. So the real question is, if Kazakh oil no longer flows through Russia, where will it flow? Where will this massive river change its course and flow? The answer to this question will change not just a pipeline route, but the geopolitical map of the next 50 years, the fate of Asia, and perhaps even the definition of war. And the answer is part of a plan that is much more complex, much deeper than you might imagine. So take a deep breath, because now we're going to dive deep beneath the surface into how that oil and money are really changing course, into the backstage of the American plan, and into the sound of that new locomotive echoing across the steppe. Now, I want you to visualize that map in your mind. Imagine a massive map of Eurasia in front of you. We are right in the middle of Kazakhstan's vast lands. We have billions of barrels of oil, and it needs to go somewhere. What have we been doing so far? We've been drawing a thick line northward, upward. We were going through Russia to Novorossiysk, the port where smoke is rising right now. But now that northern route is a death line, declared a war zone by insurance companies, where freight rates have skyrocketed and a naval drone could strike at any moment. That door is locked. So what does the fluid mechanics of oil tell us? If a route is blocked, pressure builds, and the liquid finds a new path. Slowly shift your gaze downwards, southwards on the map. You'll see the new route that geopolitical and economic logic is pushing oil towards, the Turkic World Energy Corridor. Here I am talking about the energy leg of that line we call the Middle Corridor, which passes over the Caspian Sea. That project that has been on the table for years, waiting on dusty shelves, always seen as a second plan due to Russia's pressure, the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline. But what I want to tell you is not just about a pipeline, because this picture is much more than a draft drawn between Ankara and Astana. When we lift the curtain a little, we see that the most powerful player in the global great game, the United States, is back at the table. And this time, they are not coming with mere diplomatic messages. They are coming with billion-dollar checks in hand. Consider this. To interpret Kazakhstan's harsh, angry response to the Novorossiysk attack as merely a momentary outburst of anger would be naive. No, this response is the result of a Washington-centered strategy that has been meticulously planned for months. Let's rewind the film, not too far, just to November 2025, right before the attack. Do you remember Kazakh President Tokayev's visit to America? It may not have made many headlines at the time, but something historic happened there. More than 30 agreements were signed, with a total value of $17.2 billion. But among these agreements, there is one that is more valuable to me than all the others. It is the $4.2 billion agreement with the American railway giant Wabtec, which we could call the jewel of these agreements. Hold on a second. Why locomotives? Why not high-tech chips, software, or agriculture? Why those big, noisy metal beasts called locomotives? Because with that signature, the United States was sending Kazakhstan this strategic message: I will free you from Russia's logistical hegemony. Imagine the sound of those new generation freight locomotives, that heavy metallic rhythm rolling along the tracks in the silence of the steppe. That sound is actually the sound of freedom. America is saying, modernize your railways, I'm giving you the world's most powerful freight beasts. Don't send your oil, uranium, and critical minerals north to Russia anymore. Load them onto wagons, take them to the Caspian Sea, and transport them to the west from there. This is not just a commercial transaction. This is a battle for logistical independence. This is where the story gets even more complicated, because Kazakhstan is not just trying to escape Russia. At the same time, it feels the breath of another much larger, much quieter, and much more dangerous power rising from the east on its neck. While Russia bleeds in the west on the Ukrainian front, who do you think is filling the void created in the east? There is no room for vacuums in geopolitics. That vacuum is being filled by Beijing's UN diplomacy. And this is where Kazakhstan's terrifying moment of being caught between two giants begins. There is a very basic rule in geopolitics. There are no vacuums. When one power withdraws, it does not leave a clean airspace behind. Another power immediately fills that vacuum. While Russia bleeds on its western borders, in the mud of Ukraine, things are very different in the east. In Kazakhstan's other giant neighbor, the People's Republic of China, much more quietly, much more methodically, and frankly, much more dangerously, it is rising. Beijing's famous UN diplomacy is seeping like water into the authority vacuum left by Russia. But let me tell you this is not a salvation for Kazakhstan. It is a new and frightening nightmare of equilibrium. I don't want to overwhelm you with numbers, but take a look at this data. Do you know how much China's Belt and Road investments in Central Asia, and especially in Kazakhstan, amounted to, in just the first half of 2025, over $23 billion? That's an astronomical figure. But this money isn't just being spent on bridges, roads, or factories. It's being spent to buy political influence. China is taking advantage of Russia's weakness to bring the region's energy and logistics infrastructure under its own control. A very insidious economic term comes into play here. Those who remember their economics lessons will know: monopsony. We all know about monopoly, meaning a single seller. But monopson is much more ruthless: single buyer. If Kazakhstan cannot sell its oil to the west, if the Russian route is completely closed, there will be only one customer left to whom it can sell its goods: China. And China is known for ruthlessly driving down prices in markets where it is the sole buyer. In this scenario, Kazakhstan, while escaping Russia's military threat, finds itself caught in China's economic stranglehold. The Tokayev administration is currently walking a tightrope. That's why the Novorossiysk crisis is not just a logistical problem. It is a battle to preserve Kazakhstan's sovereignty. But there's something else I need to tell you. We cannot explain Kazakhstan's harsh response to Russia solely with today's anger. In fact, the strings began to break long before Novorossiysk, deep in the steppe in Orenburg. Let's rewind the film a little. The real moment when the 30-year energy marriage between Kazakhstan and Russia began to crack was not when the port of Novorossiysk was hit. The real breaking point was when Ukraine's long-range kamikaze drones struck Russia's Orenburg gas facility. The shockwave from that explosion was felt much more in Astana than in Moscow. Why? Because the Orenburg facility was a vital organ for heating Kazakhstan's northern regions. Imagine it's the middle of winter, it's minus 30 degrees outside, and the gas heating you comes from your neighbor's facility. When Ukraine hit that facility, Kazakhstan's heating supply was threatened overnight. This incident shattered trust between the two countries. And the crisis didn't stop at energy. It quickly spread to borders and logistics routes. I want you to visualize what's happening right now at the Russia-Kazakhstan border. You know that thin border line you see on the map? That line has now turned into a truck queue stretching for miles. Drivers have been waiting for days. Engines are idling. Supply chains are on the verge of breaking. So why? Why is an invisible Berlin Wall being built between these two countries that claim boundless friendship? The answer is very simple and very human: fear. Or rather, Vladimir Putin's security paranoia. After the war in Ukraine, the Kremlin views every truck and every container coming from China and Kazakhstan as a potential Trojan horse. Fearing sabotage, they are blocking thousands of trucks at the border under the guise of technical inspections. This is a bullet fired at Kazakhstan's vision of being a transit country. But Kazakhstan is not staying silent. And this is my favorite part of the story. Astana is practicing passive resistance against Moscow's aggressive stance. Kazakh customs officials have started doing the same. They are deliberately slowing down the bureaucracy for goods going to or coming from Russia, prolonging procedures. They are using bureaucracy as a weapon. With this shadow economic war, Kazakhstan is sending Putin the following message: if you cannot ensure my energy security and you hinder my trade, I will choke your logistics lifeline. I don't need you. You see, don't you? The explosion in Novorossiysk was just the last straw. When all these factors come together, they create a perfect geopolitical storm that pulls Kazakhstan out of Russia's orbit and propels it towards the Turkic world and the West. The U.S. is providing the money. Turkey is opening the route. Ukraine is eliminating the old route, i.e. Russia. This is a coordinated checkmate move. So how will the map change at the end of this game? And what does this change mean in Ceyhan, where those steel pipes reach the Mediterranean? Let's pause for a moment and digest this picture, because in the end, we will see that this story is not just about Kazakhstan, but about the very concept of war itself changing. Now, let's pour what we've discussed so far onto that big table in our minds. Let's see what we have. On one side, there is a Russian port burning in the icy waters of the Black Sea and sinking shadow tankers. On the other side, there are American-made giant locomotives roaring westward across the Kazakh steppes. At the border gates, there are angry truck drivers, helplessly waiting at the wheel, locked in by Russian bureaucracy. And in the middle of it all, a country trying to turn its face from north to south, from war to trade: Kazakhstan. At first glance, these pieces may seem like a series of chaotic events, independent of each other, erupting in different corners of the world. You hear about each one under a different headline in the morning news. One is war news, another is economic news, another is diplomatic news. But if you take a few steps back and look at that big strategic map, that chessboard where the great game is being played, you begin to see the tremendous order within the chaos. What you see is no coincidence. What you see is a geopolitical checkmate move. And the choreography of this move is so flawless, its timing so meaningful, that it seems to be directed by an invisible conductor. Look at the players. The United States provides the financing, putting those green dollars on the table. Turkey, using its geographical advantage and historical ties, is opening the route, that secure corridor. And Ukraine Ukraine, using its military power, those kamikaze drones, is physically destroying the old route, the Russia option, erasing it from the map. These three different capitals, Washington, Ankara, and Kiev, may not have gathered in the same room to make this plan. Perhaps this was a natural alliance brought about by the flow of history, but the result of their actions is pushing Kazakhstan and the vast wealth of Central Asia toward one inevitable conclusion, a definitive and irreversible break from Russia. Let's analyze this a little more deeply. Let's not rush, because the phrase change in the energy route sounds like a simple logistical term. It's as if we were talking about something as simple as a cargo truck missing a highway exit and taking the next turn. But a change of route in the oil market is not that. In the oil market, a shift in the main artery means a shift in the world's axis. It is a transfer of power. I want you to imagine the current situation through two different ports, two different destinies. And in your mind, go to the north of the map to where the smoke is rising, to Novorossiysk. What is the situation there now? It is now a place that risk analysts at Lloyd's of London have marked in red on the map in front of them. War zone. It is an economic black hole where freight rates, i.e., the cost of transporting a barrel of oil, have skyrocketed. Every tanker captain entering there is essentially playing Russian roulette. The crew is terrified. Will a sea drone come up from just below the water today and pierce our hull? Will a missile hit us while we're loading at the port? The oil market is the most skittish thing in the world. It hates uncertainty. And Novorossiysk is currently the capital of uncertainty in the world. Now step out of that chaos. Turn your head south toward the warm, calm waters of the Mediterranean, toward Turkey's southern coast, toward the Ceyhan terminal. Unlike Novorossiysk, it is quiet here. It is operational. The pumps are working rhythmically. But what really makes this place valuable is the invisible shield over it. The Ceyhan terminal is on the territory of a NATO country, within Turkey's sovereign territory. Do you know what that means? It means that the moment Kazakh oil enters that pipeline and reaches Ceyhan, the war risk premium on it is eliminated. For investors, for oil traders, it's like leaving a noisy, rowdy bar where glasses are being smashed and entering a safe, soundproof, secure room. The Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline. For years, this pipeline remained in Russia's shadow. For decades, Russia whispered, and sometimes shouted, to the Central Asian countries, "Why seek adventure when I have my pipelines? I am your big brother. I am your safe harbor." But on the morning of November 29th, that illusion ended. The Big Brother fairy tale came to an end. Kazakhstan saw that Russia's safe harbor was burning. Russia's own army cannot even protect its port. Worse still, Russia's excuses of technical malfunctions never end. The habit of using the valve as a tool for political blackmail, a stick for discipline, never changes. In contrast, the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline is under the sovereignty of the Turkish states. Unlike Russia's cumbersome, rusting, leaking infrastructure left over from the Soviet era, it is a modern, high-tech pipeline, and most importantly, one that is free from political blackmail. That is why Kazakhstan's move is not just a logistical plan B. It is the end of a 30-year monogamous energy marriage. It is a divorce protocol. Think about it. 30 years, a lifetime. Since 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed and Kazakhstan gained its independence, Kazakhstan had handed over the key to its economy, the password to its coffers, to Moscow. It was a "you protect me, I remain loyal to you" agreement. Structures like the Collective Security Treaty Organization, CSTO, established by Vladimir Putin, were the institutional framework for this loyalty, the marriage certificate. But how do marriages end? They usually end when one party realizes that the other can no longer protect them, or even harms them, drags them down. Kazakhstan saw that its partner Putin's image of regional leadership sank along with those tankers and piles of scrap metal in the waters of Novorossiysk. The ship is taking on water, the deck is on fire. And Kazakhstan is not an emotional or foolish state that would chain itself to a sinking ship. The Tokayev administration is abandoning ship with a very cool-headed, very calculated, and extremely rational decision. They are lowering the lifeboats and turning the course toward Turkey. So what does this mean for Russia? Don't measure it only in dollars and cents. Yes, they will lose billions of dollars in transit fees. Yes, they will lose their ability to mix Kazakh oil with their own Urals oil, claim this is not Russian oil, and sell it to the world, circumventing sanctions. These are significant, painful economic losses. But the real loss is something that doesn't appear on balance sheets and can't be measured. This is the logistical collapse of an empire. When we read history books, we always look for the collapse of empires on the battlefield, like Napoleon's fall at Waterloo, like the Germans freezing at Stalingrad, like the signatures on the great treaty tables. But perhaps in the modern world, in the 21st century, empires do not collapse like this. Perhaps empires collapse when they lose their roads before they lose their territory. They collapse when they lose their connections. Consider the Roman Empire. Rome was Rome because it controlled the roads. The saying, all roads lead to Rome, was not arrogance, but a logistical reality. Those who controlled the Silk Road ruled the world for centuries. Russia, since the Tsarist era, since the Soviet era, was that enormous bridge in northern Eurasia. Everything traveling from east to west, from Asia to Europe, had to pass through Russia. This gave them immense geopolitical leverage. No bird flies without my knowledge, they said. But today, as we speak, that bridge is crumbling. The flow of energy, trade, money, and influence is shifting. The riverbed is changing. It is shifting from north to south. It is moving from the Russian steppes, dominated by war, sanctions, and chaos, to Turkey and the Turkic world, the new center of stability, cooperation, and trade. Russia is no longer an indispensable monopoly. Russia is now just a risky, expensive, and secondary option. For a state that defines itself as a superpower, could there be a heavier, more humiliating loss of status than this? And let's not forget the role of the United States in this process, that silent partner. Washington has been trying to encircle Russia since the Cold War. But you can't do that just with missiles and military bases. Real encirclement is done with railways, pipelines, and trade routes. Remember those Wabtec locomotives the U.S. gave to Kazakhstan? They are not just trains. They are the steel links in the chain that frees Central Asia from the grip of Russia and China and connects it to Turkey via the Caspian Sea and from there to Europe. It's very strange, isn't it? Let's pause for a moment and feel the weight of this moment, of this change. For years, they told us, geography is destiny. Ibn Khaldun's famous saying, Kazakhstan's destiny was to be a landlocked country, squeezed between the giant Russian bear and the Chinese dragon on the map. But today, thanks to human intelligence, strategic diplomacy, and yes, those steel pipes, a nation is rewriting its destiny. This new route connecting the two shores of the Caspian Sea, this middle corridor, is not just a pipeline carrying oil. It is a declaration of independence for Central Asia. Instead of bowing to Putin's security paranoia or China's economic pressure, Kazakhstan is choosing the third way, its own path. A sovereign path integrated with the Turkic world, speaking with the West. So as I conclude this program, I would like to leave you with this thought. When Vladimir Putin ordered those tanks to advance 3 years ago as he entered Ukraine, he dreamed of making Russia the empire of Grand Peter once again. He wanted to expand borders, intimidate the world, and extend his sphere of influence. But in the end, look at history's cruel twist. He pushed his closest ally, his most loyal partner, Kazakhstan, which he saw as his own backyard, into the arms of the West and the Turkic world with his own hands. That Ukrainian drone that exploded in Novorossiysk did not just hit an oil terminal. That drone was the final nail in the coffin of Russia's claim to be the sole ruler of Eurasia. The maps are changing. Rivers are shifting their courses. Power is flowing from north to south, and we are witnessing one of those rare, fragile, monumental moments when the course of history changes direction. This is exactly what we are trying to do. Not just to tell you what happened today, to show you how today will change tomorrow. If you want to follow with us how these maps are changing, those invisible hands behind the curtain, not just the headlines, but the deep undercurrents beneath them, please click that join button now. Subscribe to our channel. Join us so we can continue to tell the truth. Only the truth, and the bigger story behind those truths. Thank you for being with us on this journey. See you in the next episode. Goodbye.